Hey team, welcome back to another episode of the Strength Game Podcast. I'm your host, Nick O'Brien, and this is episode number 44. The Strength Game is a weekly podcast dedicated to discussing all things physical culture with the coaches, athletes, iron enthusiasts, and experts deeply embedded in the strength game on both sides of the profession, both as coaches and as competitive athletes. I want to thank everyone who has liked, commented, shared the show, and continues to subscribe to it. Your support allows us to continue to bring on expert guests and highlight more individuals in the strength game, just like our guests today. I also want to thank our sponsor, Cerberus Strength. Cerberus is an organization that puts the athlete first and is actively working towards providing the best quality gear at an affordable price. Owned and operated by active lifters, Cerberus has quickly evolved into a global brand symbolizing quality and trust. Their ever-growing product range is used by the top athletes around the world at the highest level of competition. And every single Cerberus strength product has been designed with performance in mind with the highest attention to detail. So if you're in the market for the highest quality strength conditioning gear and equipment, be sure to check out CerberusStrength.com and use promo code STRENGTH_game to receive an extra 10% off your next order. And in this week's episode, I'm excited I am joined by a former colleague of mine, Coach Andy Ward. Ward is the Assistant Director of Football Strength and Conditioning at the University of Colorado. He arrived at Colorado after 4 years at Fresno State, first as the head strength coach and then as the Director of Sports Performance for football. Prior to Fresno State, Ward was a sports performance coach at Stanford University. He began his coaching career splitting time between custom-built personal training and as a student assistant coach at his alma mater, State Stanislaus. Ward has also held internship coaching positions at Sacramento State, UC San Diego, and Stanford. Ward is a big proponent of knowing his program backwards and forwards and is always fine-tuning it to best fit his athletes' needs. He continues to stay active by hiking in the Colorado mountains and lifting, which he uses to test out new programs, research technology, and ideas on himself before implementing them with his athletes. Like I said, I'm excited to have him on the show today. So with all that said, let's get in the game with Coach Andy Ward. What's going on, everybody? Today I am joined by my former Fresno State Bulldog colleague, now Colorado Buffalo. What's going on, Andy Ward?
How you doing, my man?
Hey man, it's good to talk to you finally. I know.
Yeah, glad you have me on today.
I know we haven't got to catch up in a bit, so I'm glad we got to do this and kind of share you with the rest of the audience. But hey, let's hop right into it. I want to hear more of your backstory, how you got involved in the strength game, what like sports you played growing up, leading to like your current training and your current position now at Colorado.
Yeah, wow. So that's kind of a long story. I'll try and simplify it a little bit. I started really getting into strength conditioning in high school, I guess you could say. My high school coach, pulled me aside and started talking to me about, the weight room, how the importance of the weight room. And he started training me and showed me the ropes a little bit in high school. I played football and baseball. Ended up going to college, try and play baseball. It didn't really work out the way I thought it was going to go. But then that gave me the opportunity to get into the strength conditioning, personal training side of things. I started doing some personal training in college. And quite frankly, I was making more money doing personal training than I am now. But loved, obviously the sports side of things. And, couldn't deny that aspect of my life. And so started switching gears from personal training when I graduated, switched back into strength conditioning and doing a lot more with that. Did a little bit in college and, kind of gave me a taste for it of, you could actually make money training athletes. So that's kind of how I got into it.
Yeah, I know you worked at a bunch of different places, and I mean, a lot of people have started their careers kind of as personal trainers, and that's the one cool thing about personal training, besides like getting to work with such a wide variety of people, which I mean is a double-edged sword, but the amount of work you do for that determines like your income, which is nice. strength conditioning should follow suit. That would be that.
Man, could you
take a
imagine
note.
getting paid per athlete?
Paid per athlete or even paid per hour, like
Per
a
hour,
reasonable
yeah.
salary? Jesus, I would be on top of
Yeah.
that.
I'm not gonna lie, I'd be all about that. You know, in the personal training world, you can just you charge whatever you want. So, you know, charging $60 an hour. You know, I didn't know shit back then. I thought I knew everything. You know, nowadays I look back and I'm like, why the hell was I doing that?
Oh, no question. I mean, that's if you go back and you look at a program and like you're not just completely disgusted with yourself or beating your head against the wall why you did that, then I don't think you're really trying to get any better, and you're just playing status quo at that point. And I'm sure you learned a bunch of stuff like from your time like at Stanislaus. I know you were at UC San Diego, Sac State. You did personal training too, and then leading yourself like to Stanford, where you spent. I mean, Stanford and Fresno, you kind of split the majority of your time.
Yeah.
Like between that time period, kind of climbing the ladder, like into the strength conditioning professional, working up to be like full time. Were there any like big lessons or things like when you first got like more in depth into it that maybe you weren't aware of that kind of threw you for a loop as like being a strength coach, maybe besides monetary value and salaries?
Yeah, that's a good. So I guess a lot of the lessons I learned when I was doing some of my internships at UC San Diego, and then I was that part-time guy / intern, half and half there at Sacramento State. You know, I really thought I knew a lot. And then it really started to open my eyes, especially when I got to Sacramento State. It really opened my eyes. Well, man, I really don't know as much as I think. And then I got to Stanford, and Coach Shannon Turley really opened my eyes to a lot of the functional movement stuff and the culture building and just so much more that actually went into running a high level program. I felt like I knew nothing and then went through a phase where I was like, well, F my school. They didn't prepare me. F these internships. I don't know shit, you know? And, you know, Shannon Turley, high level coach, you know, I'm working with him obviously here at Colorado. You know, that's when I really started to open my eyes when started working at Stanford. Then I took a lot of that stuff, thought I was prepared for Fresno, and quickly realized that you don't just only train athletes when you're the head guy. You got a lot of other responsibilities to deal with. You got to deal with the head coach that's demanding. You got to deal with administration that has their own agenda. You got to deal with other coaches on staff, the football staff that, you know, want, hey, let me talk to you about my position that I only have 6 guys in. Man, I got to worry about 110 guys, bro. I can't worry about this one kid in your 6 athlete position, you know? And so, you know, I feel like every step of the way I've learned something. Every step of the way has kind of opened my eyes to something different. But, you know, it's just kind of been a different, you know, quote unquote learning experience at each level or each step, so to speak.
No, that's a great answer. I like hearing all that stuff. And I think every place you go, every level you kind of get, or even like within the same place, like advancing within your own career, you start learning more things. And then the more you learn, the more you realize, the less you know.
You realize you don't know.
Exactly.
There's definitely someone out there that's smarter than you.
I know. And it's great to be surrounded by people. Obviously, when we work together, we pick, like my goal is to pick your brain as much as possible, even just sit there and observe and see how you guys were doing. And I mean, when you're the head guy, there are a lot of more things that go on behind the scenes that you're not really sure of. Like now, I know you're kind of in an interesting position. Obviously, you're working back with Turley again, where you kind of worked at Stanford. So you're in a completely different role, but you're still like an assistant position, like where you're assisting him as much as possible. You're leading the director of sports science there, so you have a lot of different responsibilities. But having the head coach experience and kind of running the show and being the main person at the top where everything runs through you, what's kind of been the changes, kind of, I wouldn't say going back a step, but being in a different type of role and position now? Like, how have you been able to take some of that experience when you were the director of everything to more of an assistant assistant role for like Turley now?
Yeah. Well, it really, when Coach Tedford retired, I obviously you want to stay in that kind of role and you want to stay the head guy and stay in charge. And obviously monetarily it's more lucrative, but to take the step back, you kind of I had to do a couple things. One, I had to stay humble, and I had to, tell myself that, hey, it wasn't a personal decision. It wasn't, anything performance driven. I did a good job. I felt like I did a good job. Everyone around me told me I was doing a good job. It was just, inside the football world, it comes down to, who and, certain coaches want certain guys in roles. And so I had to just remind myself that to stay humble. So at Fresno, when Ron McKeefery came in, I was actually initially like obviously mad that I was in a different role, but excited to get an opportunity to work for Ron McKeefery. But when we started developing our relationship, and I started to get into a groove of, okay, this is what he wants. Where can I bring my value? Okay, this is how he's doing his things. Maybe I can make this suggestion and make this twist to make it a little bit better. And then you start developing that communication and collaboration, is when I really started to kind of get back into the groove of being an assistant. And when Shannon called to come to Colorado, I felt pretty compelled to. It was a hard decision, I'll say that, but pretty compelled to come here because of the resources that they have to be able to implement more sports science. And when I was at Fresno, that was the thing that I really, really started to take on more and more and implement into my program that we really didn't do at Stanford. And Coach Turley realized that. Coach Turley, me talking with him throughout the years while I was at Fresno, realized that he wanted to do more sports science inside of his program as well. And so it's been kind of nice because, here Turley kind of leans on me and really wants me to kind of drive some of that stuff, which has been pretty interesting and fun to be able to, I got to start it and implement it one way at Fresno, and then come here. Now I'm getting to start over again, doing the things that I want to do from scratch. And I'm starting to do little things here, little things there, a little bit differently and better, maybe just changing things just to see how I like it versus the way we did it there. And obviously having more resources, you can play with bigger and better toys. So it's been, really, humble, and then just finding a way to be able to contribute is to answer your question directly.
No, I like that. I think that's a huge thing for anybody in a leadership role. Like humility is huge because,
yeah,
I mean, you need to lean on the people that are around you. I mean, it doesn't matter what the position is. If an intern has a great idea, like I want it to be to the point where like the best idea wins. If it's for the betterment of the team, it's for the betterment of our program and
betterment
staff.
of the student athlete. Anything that can make the student athlete or the student athlete experience better, man, it doesn't matter who's making the suggestion. If it's better, it's better. Now, if it's different, then just to be different, then I don't know. I'm not looking just to make things different. Right. I want it to be better.
Exactly.
But like you said, whoever has the suggestion, as long as it's better, man, let's roll with it.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, that's everybody's going to do stuff differently. If you bring something new to the table, like as long as you're prepared to defend it, you can say your rationale why, then I'm okay with going the best idea, because at the end of the day, that's what we're trying to do. It's give them the best experience, put them in the best position to be successful and be successful on the field and off the field. So that's cool to hear. And then, obviously you've worked at different levels too, like FCS level, like you've Division II when you first started as like a student assistant, like at Stanislaus, and then like Stanford. I mean, being in the Pac-12 twice, and then Fresno State's a little bit different. You've seen the different kind of like dynamics. The resources are very different, but I think more importantly than that stuff is the type of athletes that you're working with. Like, I know you've spoken on it before, and that was a big thing, like coming from Stanford to Fresno State. The type of people we're recruiting or the type of conference you're in is vastly different. How do you kind of tweak your program to like not just be a cookie cutter, like this is the best thing I have, but this is the best thing I have for the type of athletes I have, and this is the best way to prepare the type of athletes I have for the environment that they're going to be in our conference, like with our schedule, with our expectations, the standards.
Yeah, that's a good question. Because when I left Stanford, when I was at Stanford, I was absorbing everything, trying to take in as much as I could, and everything that Coach Turley talked about, I thought was gold. And so I was a little bit, I don't want to say brainwashed, but I was a little bit naive, I guess you should say, to how different places can do it and stuff like that. And so at Stanford, you're dealing with a different kind of kid. You got smart kids, intellectuals. You got kids that are a little bit more, that they're not going out, so to speak, on the weekends as much as some of these, normal, type kids. I'm trying to put that in a nice way there. So the athlete was so different. And it was great because, I kind of can relate to some of those kind of kids because the intellectual conversations, I had to step my game up, and it forced me to kind of research things. And post practice stretch, kids are talking about politics, they're talking about finance, they're talking about the stock market, they're talking about 18th century art, and coding. And I'm like, Jesus, I got to step my game up, and then, so that was all great experience. And then when I got to Fresno, I tried taking that program that we did at Stanford, and I tried to implement a very similar program when I first got to Fresno. Well, those kids are they're smarter. They can pick up things. They learn a little bit quicker. They can recognize things and be able to repeat it. Whereas at Fresno, those kids kind of learned with reps. And those kids were a little bit more normal, so to speak. They're talking about video games. They're talking about girls and shoes and cars and stuff like that. So that was something that was like, okay, my program, when I first got there and implemented, was a little too advanced for them. So I had to take the program. I still kept the main concept, but I tweaked things in how fast I made progressions and how fast I would take an athlete through a single leg progression or whatever it might be. So that way they could get more reps at doing something week to week to week. Instead of progressing things on a 2-week cycle, maybe we're going 3 or 4 weeks on certain things, and just really slowing it down and just focusing on simplicity and execution. And they were still athletic, don't get me wrong, but there's probably a reason they're at Fresno State versus a Pac-12 type school. And typically it's going to be one of two things. It's going to be academics. Maybe they're athletically gifted, but academics prevented them from getting to a Pac-12 school, or maybe their academics is good, but they're maybe not as athletic. So we had to kind of go to more foundational type stuff on the field and in conditioning, focusing on more movement pattern, quality of movement patterns, and technique type drills on certain things. And then when I got back to Colorado, I was like, oh yeah, it's just a little bit different type of athlete when I come to Colorado. Just, being at Fresno for 4 years, you start seeing similar types of athletes roll through, and then you get here and you're like, oh shit, you move different. Oh wow, that's a different kind of body right there. Holy shit, you look like freaking JJ Watt. And it's a little bit more fun here at Colorado. Actually, I think I'm enjoying Colorado quite a bit because you get a good mixture of some intellectual kids. There's definitely some intellectuals, but you also get some normal kids. So I've, taken the best of both worlds from Fresno and Stanford, and they're smart enough to be able to implement some progressions on 2-week basis, which is really nice to be able to progress them the way I want to progress them on timelines that I want to progress them on. But at the same time, there's still some basic foundational movement qualities that we're trying to focus on the field. So it's kind of a mixture of both worlds.
That's cool. Yeah, that definitely, having both those experience in your back pocket, like that definitely blends. I guess it plays well, like in the role you're in now, for sure.
Stanford and Fresno couldn't have been more drastically different.
Yeah, they're not too far away, but they're on different wavelengths for sure.
For sure.
That's cool though, kind of touching on all that stuff. And what I really want to talk about too, because like obviously you touched on like the resource values a little bit different, and you originally had done, like, you started developing and adding more things into the program at Fresno State, and like you said, you really started to kind of find a niche for it and like find some passion in implementing those things. And now you can kind of start over, like, so to say, within your role now. So like starting your own sports science, like side sports performance part, what would you say are like the first steps in the process of someone either looking to add this in that may or may not have the resources available, but what are some of the things that you really need to be mindful in before you just start throwing thousands of dollars at GPS or force plates, stuff like that? Like where does anybody like actually get involved with this?
The first thing I would encourage anyone to do is to do their research. Like that's one of my biggest pet peeves is people being like, oh, I need GPS. We have to have GPS. Okay, well, what are you going to track? How are you going to utilize it? How are you going to interpret the data? How are you going to make changes to the program? You know, what are some of these, how are you going to implement it into your program? You can't just say you need GPS just because every other school in America has GPS, you know? So really, you know, with the resource side of things, there's all kinds of different companies out there. So whatever you want to do, you can find anyone from, you know, the cheap version all the way up to the freaking Rolls Royce version, you know, and you just got to figure out what you want to do, why you want to do it, how are you going to implement it, and then how are you going to affect change inside your program. And once you figure out all that stuff, then I think you can kind of start going down, okay, this is the company I want, the kind of things I'm looking for, because just because every other program has GPS or every other program, you know, especially in the beginning, just some simple things you can do to do in the very beginning is this implement, you know, daily wellness questionnaires and session RPEs. And that's free. You can go on Google Suite and, you know, build a Google form and send that out to the athletes, and then build a Google Sheet that just collects the data and be able to do something, you know, so simple. There's so many guys on the internet now that help you with those dashboards. You know, you can build something super simple in a couple hours and start with something that costs you no money. And you can see how the athlete's responding to the training load, and you can see how the athlete's feeling before you even start the day. So I think those are some things that are really simple to start with.
Yeah, I'd agree. I mean, that's how I kind of started when I got GPS. Probably got it for partially the wrong reasons, because I knew we knew that when I first got it at my previous school at Loyola with the soccer team, that we were recruiting guys that had it within their developmental program. Like you're getting guys that are playing at Red Bulls too, and that are playing at all these professional, like high quality academy teams, and they have it. So to try to entice them to come to a school that doesn't have it, they're already kind of put off. Yeah. But we started with like questionnaires and all that sort of thing to build some compliance and see if we could actually get them to be honest, because it was going to be the same thing. They're not going to wear the units, and what's the point?
Yeah.
So no, it's a great place to start. I think one of the other really good places to start is like doing the things yourself. Like you said, finding the research, but also like getting one of them to like play around with, or talking to a company to like try it out, or even yourself in your own training, like doing like RPE and doing wellness scores, and kind of seeing the trends for yourself to see if you can be honest. Because if you can't be compliant yourself, then coaching staff
expect your athletes.
Exactly. Hey, so with your own training, like you're still active, like doing a lot of stuff. I know you got the garage gym hopefully up and running in Colorado now. Oh, yeah. There you go.
That was week 1.
Perfect. Hey, so but a lot of what you implement within your teams and what you work with your players has already kind of run through like your garage gym. Like you've done it yourself. Yeah. You're ahead of the program, or during COVID and everything, we were trying out different sprint protocols and stuff like that. So how do you kind of practically go about using like new science, or using like different methods in your programming on yourself before you actually add it into your athletes? And have you seen a benefit?
Yeah. I mean, kind of like we've talked about before, like me and you have talked about this. Some people just buy stuff and they implement it without even knowing what they're utilizing or what they're trying to do. And something that I like to do is make sure that I know exactly how to use it, why I'm using it, and then how I can make my adjustments based on that. So some things that we're starting with here is we're doing some velocity-based training to predict 1-rep maxes. Coach Turley's not a big guy. I'm putting a lot of weight on the bar and trying to do a 1-rep max. And especially when we first got here, man, these guys were really functionally weak. And so they had a lot of injuries and a lot of chronic overuse type stuff because of the weight room and because they were loading the bar and doing all kinds of stuff like that. And I'm not trying to talk bad on the previous strength coach. I actually think he's a good coach and a good guy, but that's just where we were when we got here. And so now we're trying to do things where all right, well, let's put, and this is some of that Mladen stuff we were playing with, let's do a set at 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90%, 6 sets, 1 to 2 reps each set. You take your fastest speed. And now we're looking at slope, intercept, it's creating an R squared, and then you're getting a predicted 1-rep max from there. And so we've been doing that essentially every 2 weeks. And so that's something that we've established. And then the other thing that we're working through right now is trying to integrate some of the GPS concepts. We've talked about this before where, in season, I'm not a big fan of GPS and making adjustments based on GPS. Because let's be honest, the head coach, offensive coordinator, if they want that receiver to run a certain play because that's going to work on game day, well, that fucking receiver is going to run a certain play and he's going to practice that play and they're going to run that play until they get that play correctly. No matter how many times you tell that coach, hey, coach, he's getting a little hot right now. Hey, coach, he might tweak a hamstring. They're going to run that play. And so that's the thing that I've learned is when I first got to Fresno, I was like, oh, the first thing we got to do is get GPS. Well, man, I was fucking wrong because Coach Tedford didn't give a fuck. So we're still implementing some of that though, because what I think is good though, is being able to collect practice data and game data. So that way your off-season training can be able to match and prepare the athlete for the demands of what they're about to get into in training camp. And so we've been established. We got that up and rolling. Teddy O'Connor was doing it before me. He did a great job. I took it over when he left. And we looked at a lot of data in spring ball. He kind of showed me some stuff of what we did last training camp, even though it was a little bit different with COVID. Still gives us a good idea of what we're going to be able to do. And then Coach Turley's taking some of that data and he's trying to, okay, well, this is where we're at here. This is where we need to be. And, we've had a pretty good progression throughout the summer to get them ready for training camp. So those are the two things that we're kind of doing right now. But I took a GPS unit when I was at Fresno home and I was doing a lot of these runs and a lot of this conditioning and stuff like that to see, okay, well, what if I do this run? What do those metrics look like on for a practice? Okay, well, this is what the practice looks like. Well, what's this run look like compared to this practice? And I was doing a lot of that kind of stuff to see on myself, one, is this run even feasible to withstand for, an 8-week training period? If I want to try and train them like that, how should I progress them? How can I make my tweaks and changes and stuff like that?
Yeah, I think that's a great way to do it. Like, be your own test subject. And I mean, if you're not going to be able to get through it and you can control the majority of your stressors a lot better than an 18-year-old athlete that doesn't understand like the training principles and what you're actually trying to apply, doesn't have the same like background in education, then you've got no shot with even a freak athlete sometimes.
Exactly. Like you said, I'm controlling my own variables. I'm trying to eat right. I'm doing the things I need to do. Last 8 months, a little rough on the sleep department with my little baby at home, but I'm still trying to get my 8 hours of sleep. Sometimes I, get 7 or whatnot because of her, but I'm still getting a decent amount of sleep, definitely more than an athlete.
Oh yeah. Yeah. That'll throw a wrench in it for sure, but it's a good change of pace for you. So, hey, but like touching on all that stuff, like I like what you said about the GPS and not really trying to change practices or anything like that. And that's what I try to do, not make wholesale changes, but make suggestions. But at the end of the day, like sometimes coaches are going to run them in the dirt just because it's time to do it. or sometimes coaches are going to say, we're going to get it right till we get it right. And that's just the end of it. So being able to kind of use a GPS to solidify what like a worst case scenario is, what a typical session, and then like project what looks like on certain practice days. So at least you can stay within a zone. Then it helps you in return to play. It helps you build progressions coming back from summer, like into camp. So you know what to, like you said, what to prepare them for on match day, what also to prepare them for the style that you guys actually play in practice, more so than trying to stay pigeonholed into this specific, oh, well, we checked off all these boxes, practice is over. It's like, oh, I don't know. I don't think about that.
Exactly.
I don't think so.
Yeah, the one thing I'll say though is with the GPS, I've really become more of a heart rate fan and doing a lot of the internal load tracking and using Trimp mod with the different zones and stuff like that. And so, that's the one thing that I think coaches kind of can understand a little bit better is like, they don't care how much the athlete runs. Right. They're going to do their thing. They're going to run their practice. They're going to do what they want to do. But if you tell a coach and hey, coach, last Tuesday was this kind of load, and, I try and put it into terms of like number of plays, like, hey, per play, our load was this. Today, per play, our load was this, and it's significantly higher, then they start to kind of understand, oh, shit. Their heart was working harder on today's practice. Well, okay, well, why was that? And then once they ask that question, you kind of got them bought in a little bit and they're at least intrigued. And that's when you got to be able to have the knowledge from all that research that you did to be able to hit them with, well, this is why. And then that kind of opens the door a little bit to be able to create some change on if that's what you're trying to do is create change. But the internal load is something that I've become a big fan of.
Yeah, I think within what you said, the most important thing was like the way you deciphered the information and provide it to the coaches. Like you said, instead of using it as like, oh, their trim score and their high intensity distance acceleration versus deceleration was 75 over, like use what you put it in like terms of plays, or you used like the coaches like terms and language, and you made them more interested in and created an open dialogue where they were actually intrigued, asking questions, and then like it's hook, line, and sinker at that point. They see that this actually helps football rather than becomes like another thing that you throw on their desk.
Exactly. And that's the thing too, is I'm not going to lie, some of these football coaches really aren't that educated. They know football and they're very educated in the sport of football, but they don't care about freaking high speed distance and IMAs and all this different. They don't even know what you're talking about. So it's like, if you can kind of talk to their level, and with football coaches, they always talk about plays. Well, this is a 24 play period, or, hey, this is going to be a 36 play period. Then it's like, okay, now I kind of know how you're talking. Well, I'm going to come down to your level, or I'm going up to your level, however you want to put it. And now we're able to speak a similar language.
Right. Yeah, there's no doubt that's definitely helpful and speeds up what you guys are doing and makes everything more impactful. Hey, you kind of touched on it a little bit. Like, obviously, you've got the baby girl at home and your stressors are a little bit different, and your internal load is probably affected and your sleep is definitely affected. In terms of like factoring in and managing and kind of addressing all these stressors, like obviously these are your stressors for you. And if you're trying to train at a high level or even try to do the program that you're doing for the athletes ahead of time, that affects what you're able to do. So being able to practice what you preach and that, how does like factoring in all these different things that a collegiate athlete like a Colorado has to deal with, how does that affect how you program, manage like speed and agility sessions or even conditioning, knowing that, all right, they might be out partying or they might have these long class schedules and stuff like that? How do you kind of educate them or at least plan ahead for these things to pop up?
Yeah. Well, let's start with my wellness scores. My wellness scores are pretty poor right now. I gotta admit, but I definitely, do my daily wellness questionnaire and track my info. But with Colorado, I mean, let's be honest, this is quote unquote the number one party school in America, at least up there with some of the best in the country. And so I'm not gonna lie. I mean, our guys, they're going out and they actively talk about going out and they actively talk about what they're gonna do on the weekend. And the best thing that you can do is just educate them on obviously the effects and obviously some of that kind of stuff. But the thing that I like to do is I like to compare external load, the GPS data to the internal load, all the heart rate stuff, and use objective information, because those subjective wellness questionnaires, they're exactly what it is. They're subjective. So like if an athlete's saying, hey, I'm tired, or hey, I don't have the same energy level or whatever it is, but their internal load is still good and they're not feeling any effects from the internal load side of things, and the external load is high and the internal load is low, well then great, man. We can keep increasing our workload and they're adapting exactly what we want to do. But as soon as you start to see that internal load and that heart rate start to, not heart rate, but TRIMP scores start to inflate a little bit, and that starts to get a little high and our external load's high, well now, okay, shit, we need to maybe look at decreasing some workload, maybe managing some volume, or we can just go ahead and keep pushing through and we're going to get injured. And if they get injured, well, then that's on you, because you didn't take care of your body and you didn't do what you need to do on the weekends and throughout the week to make sure that you're preparing at a high level. And so we've taken both routes so far since I've been here. And right now we're in a state to where we're kind of starting to decrease some workload, just because this is week 7 of the summer program, and guys are starting to, feel the effects of everything. And the guys are actually starting to talk about, hey coach, I can't do this I can't go out like I was going out in the early summer and stuff like that. And so we're starting to see them start to do a better job on that side of things. And so now that we're actually getting better buy-in on that stuff, then it's like, okay, now we can actually make tweaks and changes to our external load and what we're providing them with the stimulus, because we know that they're starting to buy into what we're talking about. And so in the beginning, I'm not gonna lie, we didn't make a whole lot of changes based on what the athletes were saying on, some of the wellness side of things, because they were just partying hard. There was a reason that they struggled in the injury department in these last couple of years. And so now that we're getting that buy-in, though, we're starting to make some of those changes. And once you compare internal load and external load, then you look at the wellness perception of well-being side of things. But I don't necessarily think that you should start with the wellness stuff and then make changes based off wellness, because you got to look at internal and external load and compare those two first.
Yeah, that's a good point. Like, it's good to take all that information in, and even if you just implement a lot of either the technologies or some of these like questionnaires or any sort of internal, external like load feedback, whether subjective or objective, there's no reason that says you need to like go in and make big changes right away.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
Observation. I mean, even stepping into a new program and stuff like that, observation and getting a feel for where the athletes are, what kind of like what the culture is and all that stuff in the beginning. I think that plays a huge role, because they might be doing something like completely right. You might be the issue, or exactly. What you're trying to implement is completely like wrong. So that's cool to see that. But it's also cooler to see like now that you started to implement the system and you didn't go in there like guns blazing to try to change stuff, use their information. You didn't use it against them. Now they're starting to realize, all right, I can't be super successful on the field and be super successful on the weekends. Like, one of them has to like concede to the other a little bit. So where's the line going to be? Which one do I want more? I mean, you're not trying to change them completely, but you're educating them.
Let's be honest, they're a college athlete. They're going to do what they do, but you're just trying to, the random Tuesday night, you know what I'm saying? That's where we're trying. That's where we first got here culturally. it's gotten a lot better. And once you start to get the culture right, then you can start making real adjustments based on real information.
For sure. Yeah. So you've been obviously stepping into this role. You've been exposed to a lot of different training, different training atmospheres, like different resources, different types of systems and everything. Like with all that in mind, like how has your like training personally and then like your programming for your athletes like really evolved over your career? And then like have they influenced each other? Or is right now your training always is what your athletes are going to do and you're kind of just the test subject for them?
It's evolved over the years. When I first started, in college, post-college, early career, I was just doing what I wanted to do, and I thought that's how everyone should train. And now, where I'm at now is I go through phases, and I like to, if I'm going to have a 6-week off season with the boys or an 8-week off season, I'll try and take myself through that 6 to 8 week off season or a version of it at least to be able to see how my body adapts and the changes that I can make or lose, so to speak, depending on the variables you're trying to affect, in that period. And then I always have my staple program that I'm always going to go back to. So right now I'm kind of bouncing back and forth between, okay, this is what we need to do for the athletes, and this is what I want to try on my body to see how it affects. But I'm a meathead at heart. So I'm always going to go back to wanting to push heavy weights and, a little bit, max dynamic type concepts in a week, conjugate style, West Side style type stuff. And so I always go back to that. And then, but when it comes time, okay, hey, shit, I'm 8 weeks out here. I got to see what this kind of program looks like before we implement it. That's, hey, shit, I got to hop on that program for a little while to see what it's like.
I like it. Yeah, I remember some of the stuff that we'd done in the past, like even trying to test out the new belt squat and figure out what the breaking point of that is for a few weeks. I mean, those are all good things to know. Like, I mean, going into a new role, that's my first thing to do. Like, I want to try out every single rack, try out all the equipment. Like, even though I might have chains, like are these chains different? Because Fresno State chains are different, in case you're wondering.
They're different. I threw on my first week here, I threw on some chains, and I was like, oh shit. And I went over, weighed the chains. And I was like, oh, these are actual normal chains.
Oh, okay. These are real ones. But that stuff, I think that's worth its weight in gold. Like knowing not only the program that you're trying to implement with your team, but knowing the atmosphere and being able to control those things and dictate it. And I know that from your time at Stanford to when you came to Fresno and you tried to, you successfully did it with the team, and like you developed a certain type of culture when they came in the weight room, and those things definitely carry over to your time at Colorado. And that's a big part of it, like knowing the atmosphere, knowing the implementation, like all the equipment that you're going to be using, having all the interns, all the coaching assistants on your side. Like, I think the more people that understood that, the better suited the environment was to shape the athletes. And that's definitely a difficult thing to like really kind of get jump started. I know it was different for you kind of hopping back in with Turley, like at Colorado, because you guys knew the system, but you'd been removed from a long time and you brought a lot of new stuff to the table. But for someone like really stepping into like a new role, like, or a new position, what would you say are like some of the like big keys to success, like regardless if it's a director or an assistant role or even just an internship role? What are some of like the big successful things that you need to accomplish within that first week and that first month with your team?
Wow, that could be a whole freaking hour conversation right there. I think some of the main things that you need to do is you need to observe initially, and you need to figure out exactly who the athletes you are that you're dealing with. You need to, if you're stepping into an assistant intern type role, you need to figure out ways you can contribute and how you can contribute to the program. if you're in like a head type role, you need to figure out exactly what the team needs to be able to be, successful, because each team needs something different. Every year at Fresno, my program changed slightly just based on who we had and, freshman versus vet loaded team and stuff like that. So I think those are some of the things is being able to observe and figure out exactly where you can contribute and stuff like that. But also one of my biggest things that I always tell young coaches is you need to be confident and you need to be adaptable. If you're confident with your athletes and you come across as passionate and genuine and confident in your knowledge that you're speaking, they're going to respect you and they're going to be able to, okay, this guy, I can fuck with this guy. You know what I'm saying? And if you're adaptable, then I think that kind of goes a long ways on a lot of different things, because like, there might be a day where, you want to do something your way. If I'm an assistant or an intern, but I'm not able to, and on the fly, I need to make this change because this is the way the head guy wants to do it. Or if you're a head guy, you need to be adaptable in the sense that, hey, head coach wants to do this. Well, maybe, you have a collaboration, blah, 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 but then you need to adapt to do something a little bit differently to appease them a little bit as well. So those are kind of the main things that I always kind of talk about with the young guys, and is being confident, adaptable, and observe.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, those are all great things. I mean, even regardless if it's the first day, it's the first month, or it's year 10, I think, I mean, the program changes so much, even with the addition of just one new player, or, I mean, when you come back in, you might have 25 new players, like for your football squad. So the culture shifts, like even some of the position coaches, like all those things. Dynamic. Exactly.
It's not a static thing. So
yeah, and I would say the same thing like with the program. Like what's written on the paper is definitely not the same thing that gets implemented that day. And it's
exactly
verbatim. It's not going to happen. You have to be adaptable in those positions. And as assistants, it's a little bit different because you need to do everything possible so the head coach can run it smoothly. As a head coach, you need to make sure that what was detailed and planned out accordingly beforehand was the best case scenario. And then everybody has to be on the same page, trying to make sure that we adhere to it as much as possible within those dynamic circumstances. So that was a great point. So looking forward with like your continuing education and kind of the things that you want to implement with your program, what do you think is the next thing, either in the sports performance field or sports science side, or where are you kind of really drawing your attention and like research focused on at the moment?
Ooh, yeah. So I'm just going to talk about me personally, because the industry kind of seems to be a little bit all over the place depending on who you talk to.
So you don't say.
So for me personally, I've really been diving into a lot of the force plate side of things. That's really been my area of focus. I would say really honestly the last, oh man, I feel this time's flying by, really about a year now, I guess, has been something that I really think is going to be a game changer in the industry here. Is everyone is going to be the new GPS. Everyone's going to have force plates. Everyone's going to be looking at all the same metrics. Everyone's going to be doing all this. It's just a matter of what you do with the metrics. And then the other thing that I'm kind of we're starting down the road with 1080 Sprint. 1080 Sprint, we're talking with them. We're going to try and bring in, I don't know, 2, 3, 5 units, depending on, what we can get. So that's something that I'm just starting to scratch the surface with, is some of the speed training and some of those kind of concepts. We did a little bit during COVID, me and you did, when we were doing some, some of that JB Moran, hey, everyone, if you run a 4.5 and I run a 4.5, we might run a 4.5 differently. How do you run that 4.5? What do you need versus what do I need, and stuff like that. That's something that I've really found valuable with some of that 1080 Sprint information. And so I've been talking with them quite a bit. I'm thinking about doing that Altus speed deal. I know that's been around for a little bit. That's something that some people have been posting recently. That's kind of been intriguing me. So really the speed department is kind of something that I'm going to be kind of shifting my gears into a little bit. Is kind of intriguing me. I don't know if I'll stay on it for as long as I have with the force plates, but it's at least that's what's coming next.
Yeah, I like that. I'll have to pick your brain more once you dive into some of the research, because I don't like looking at all that stuff so much. But in my current position, like that was one of the hard things about it, was I was so far removed from being able to do stuff on the field. So you became just like the strength coach only. Like you didn't get to do any of the speed development. You didn't get to do any of the mechanic stuff. And honestly, like I think that's the biggest thing that athletes really need. I mean, you need a foundation of strength, but you can't tie that stuff over to, especially with the majority of sports people work with, okay, court sports, field sports, like it's all running driven. It's all change direction, speed, acceleration, deceleration. Like if we're not having some sort of emphasis based on that, or we're not dictating any of the things, then they're forced to just apply it based off of their sports skill. Like you have a stick in your hand, or you always have a football in your hand. You're always in a helmet. Like you never get an opportunity to train it at max velocity. You never get a chance to break down a rep at 50% and actually fix technique like that.
Yeah.
Those things are crucial. And yeah, those are definitely things that I look forward to like diving into even more, like going forward. So that's awesome. Yeah. Let me know how those go. I've heard nothing but good things about Altus, and 1080 sprint is a little bit too much for me unless you got a few
pricey. It's a little pricey, but that was one of the things, when I came here, I talked to Turley. I was like, hey, this is something that I think we need, and this is why. And he's been on board with it, So yeah, it's a little pricey.
Come on, Colorado, blank checks, baby.
I wish it was like that.
Hey, so like any good training session, and like all the good ones that we had for the most part during COVID in the garage, like we end this show with a finisher. So we got 4 quarters, 4 questions, and then overtime at the end. And
all right,
leave it up to you. So if you want to go rapid fire, we can, or you could take as much as you want. But you ready?
I'm ready. Let's do it.
All right. First one I got: biggest influence in strength conditioning field and favorite athlete growing up.
Favorite athlete growing up was Barry Bonds. A huge Giants fan, huge baseball fan growing up. And then biggest influence in the strength. There's been so many different people for different reasons. It depends on what I want to research. If I'm researching, session RPE and some of that kind of stuff, I'm looking at Tim Gabbett. If I'm, it's getting into the speed stuff, it's been JB Morin. If it's, the strength world, really, it was Joe Kin that really started me getting into some of that strength with his, playbook, strength coach playbook. Plyo guy was Jimmy Radcliffe. And when I first started getting into some of the science stuff, it was, what's that Russian dude? Why am I drawing a blank? Verminsky or something. I can't remember the Russian. Verzhansky. There we go.
Nice. Yeah. Pulling from a little bit from everywhere. All right. So like you said, pretty new dad at the moment, new location, new job. But when you're not coaching and you're not training, what are some of the hobbies up there in the mountains now?
Hiking. Me and my wife have been on a hike probably twice a month. Has been our goal, and we've been sticking to it. And then I feel like I'm in the Napa Valley of microbreweries. So we've hit up about 14. Our count is up to 14 new microbreweries.
Now that's what I want to hear. Mix the two together, and then you got a party.
That's what we do.
That's awesome. Hey, so if you weren't coaching, what profession do you think you would be in? And if you could go in pro in any sport, which would it be?
If I could go pro in any sport, it'd be golf. You make a shit ton of money, and it's not that hard. It's not that hard on your body, I should say. Very hard game. If I wasn't doing strength conditioning, I've actually thought about this a lot, and I've thought physical therapy is something that I kind of like, and I think that might be a route that I would have gone.
I gotcha. All right, so setting up your ideal training day, what's your go-to either training music or PR song, and what is the best post-training meal after that?
Okay, so PR song is gonna be Skillet and Monster. That song Monster. That's one of my favorite songs as far as PR songs go and training songs. But when I actually am just lifting just to lift, I'm actually a big like sports radio or podcast guy. And then post meal, man, I love ribs with a little bit of mac and cheese and some asparagus. That's smack that shit.
Nice. All right. Last one I got for you for overtime. What is the number one characteristic or trait for a successful coach, in your opinion?
Okay. Consistency. If you're a consistent person day in and day out, and you have that high level habits, and you're consistent with high level habits, your athletes will see that, and your athletes are a reflection of you.
I really like that. I think that goes hand in hand with what you said about it earlier. Like, if you're genuine and passionate too, and if you do that on a consistent basis, and you're your own coach, and you're not trying to be a carbon copy of someone else, like, then you can't go wrong. That's awesome.
Agreed.
Hey, so for anybody that's got any further questions for you, want to check in or pick your brain on the sports science side or strength conditioning side, where can they get a hold of you or follow you?
I'm an IG guy, so I'm on Instagram at the Strength Warden.
All right, man. Hey, I'll link everything up for you, but it's good to catch up. I know we're both not. Well, you're not in Fresno at the moment, so it's good to finally get a hold of you again, man, and rehash some of the old stuff that we used to get into. Yeah. So appreciate you coming on today.
No doubt. Glad to be on, and definitely good to get on and talk some shop here.
For sure, man. Thanks again.
All right. Peace.
That's it for this episode of The Strength Game. Thank you again to this week's guest and to our sponsors, Cerberus Strength. Be sure to connect and keep up with our guests at the links in the description below. Remember to subscribe to us on Apple and Google Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast provider to stay up to date on all future episodes. Also, check us out on YouTube and CoachO'Brien.com, where you can find all the video versions of these episodes, as well as show notes, episode schedule, and much more. Comments, ratings, and reviews are always welcome and appreciated. Thanks again for tuning in, and be sure to join us next week for another great episode of The Strength Game.